The hearing today, the court at least granted me access to speak to my client. That is at least a great relief for me because I have not even have access to him since the time he had been in remand. As you know that at the subordinate court, the judge rejected my application to have access to my client in court. But today, the court seemed to have indirectly overruled that position in allowing me to speak to my client. And I managed to speak to him, and he's claiming trial and claiming his innocence in this matter. So that is what I can comment for this moment. The arguments by the state is quite absurd that to the extent that when I'm invited by the court to address or make my submissions as to whether my client should be remanded or not, because at the lower court the judge asked me what are your submissions in relation to my client being remanded at IMH. How is it that I am able to submit on these matters, whether he should be remanded at IMH or not, without being allowed the opportunity to speak to him? In fact, it is a serious derogation of my client's constitutional rights, and not allowing my client to speak to me undermines the representation of my client and erodes the confidence of the Singapore bar. So at least me being allowed access to my client is extremely a relief, and it's gratifying to hear that today. The second part of my application as to whether citizens of Singapore enjoy immediate right to access to counsel is something the judge has reserved for a later date for further arguments to be made. It looks like the judge has taken this issue very seriously. In fact, he said that this is a very important issue of right to access to counsel, and we will be before this court in December to make further submissions on the fundamental rights guaranteed for citizens for right to access to counsel. This application is extremely important because it concerns the rights of all Singaporeans, because the 20-year-old case law which has been relied by the prosecution is fossilized with little regard to the rights of citizens. This application is so important because Article 9(3) of the Constitution basically talks about right to counsel as a right, and also there is a suggestion that 48 hours should be at least a reasonable period when an accused person is brought before court and to be charged. Basically, a person has to be brought to court within 48 hours and be charged if further remand is required. So if 48 hours is a requirement, then at least when he is charged in court, he should be given the right to access to counsel. And what damage is there if an accused person is remanded further, like my client had been remanded for almost or more than a week right now, that we can advise him to change his statements or whatever. All the statements have already been taken from him, so it does not really impede the interrogation or investigation process. So the outcome of this application goes to the fundamental guarantee enjoyed by citizens of their right to access to counsel, and I think that it is such a public interest matter to be seriously regarded.